Right now, as you are watching this, a third major heat dome of the summer is locking into place over the middle of the United States, and it is arriving less than 10 days after meteorologists warned it would. Dallas hit 100 degrees on Monday and 106 on Tuesday. Phoenix is forecast to climb into the 110s this weekend. It could approach 120 degrees on Saturday. Kansas City, Missouri, is expected to push past 100 by Monday after a brief cool down in the upper 70s. And AccuWeather real field temperatures across much of the plains and the Mississippi Valley are forecast to reach between 105 and 115 degrees over the next several days. This is not this summer's first heat dome, and it will very likely not be the last. This is the story of how a pattern that first built over the eastern United States in late June, then shifted west in early July, is now returning for a third time. Why it keeps coming back, and what the data says about how long this one may last. No hype, no exaggeration, just what the forecasters and the numbers are actually saying. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and whether this heat has hit your area yet. I read every one of these. If you want grounded, sourced weather coverage instead of panic headlines, subscribe. It is free. And a like helps this reach people who need to see it before the worst of this hits their area. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Now let us get into it. To understand why this current heat dome matters, you have to understand it is not an isolated event. It is the third act of a pattern that has been repeating across the United States since the final days of June. The first heat dome of the summer developed over the central and eastern United States, beginning around June 28th and intensified through the 4th of July holiday weekend. According to the National Weather Service, heat index values during that stretch reached as high as 115 degrees across parts of the Northeast. Philadelphia recorded 3 consecutive days above 101 degrees for the first time in the city's recorded history. Atlantic City, New Jersey, tied its all-time hottest temperature ever recorded at 106 degrees. That first heat dome proved fatal. According to Wikipedia's running tally of the event, compiled from state health department data, at least 44 heat-related deaths were confirmed from the July 1st through July 4th stretch alone, including 29 in New Jersey, 7 in Pennsylvania, 4 in Illinois, 3 in New York, and 1 in Mississippi, with New Jersey's own health department reporting its confirmed toll rose from 19 to 22 deaths in a single weekend as the heat peaked. When severe thunderstorms finally broke that heat dome apart between July 4th and July 6th, they knocked out power to more than 1.3 million homes and businesses and caused 4 additional deaths of their own. The second heat dome of the summer did not wait long to take its place. It began building over the western United States on July 6th, sending Phoenix to a high of 100. 13 degrees for 3 straight days and pushing Salt Lake City to a new all-time record of 109 degrees on July 12th. From there, it pivoted east, and by July 11th, it had produced what the Washington Post's Ben Knoll described as one of the 2 strongest heat domes on the entire planet at that moment, rivaling only a separate heat dome parked over northern Africa. That system brought 115-degree heat to Montana and 100-degree heat all the way to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. By the middle of July, it had pushed into the Midwest, giving Chicago, Minneapolis, and Kansas City some of their hottest readings of the year so far, with meteorologists specifically flagging that Kansas City's heat index reached 107 degrees on July 21st and 106 the following day, prompting an extreme heat warning that stretched to July 24th. AccuWeather's senior meteorologists said at the time that rather than breaking down for good, this heat dome was expected to re-strengthen over the plains and persist through much of the remainder of the month, a forecast that is now playing out in real time, which brings us to right now. This latest third heat dome settled in over Texas and the interior Southwest earlier this week, and it is expanding in almost exactly the way forecasters said it would. Even with some cloud cover and rain moving into parts of coastal and central Texas from tropical storm, Bertha later this week, the Dallas metro area is expected to stay exceptionally hot, holding at or above 100 degrees into early next week. In the interior Southwest, spotty thunderstorms tied to the North American monsoon are doing little to cool things down, with Phoenix forecast to climb into the 110s through the weekend. Temperatures climb to near or above 100 degrees across parts of Oklahoma and Kansas this week as well. A brief pocket of cooler air sitting over northern Kansas and the Midwest in the middle of this week is expected to give way almost immediately, with hot, humid air pushing northward and temperatures in Kansas City surging from the upper 70s on Thursday and Friday into the 90s over the weekend, and likely topping 100 degrees by Monday. Highs at or above 100 degrees are expected to become commonplace across the Dakotas from this weekend into early next week. Minneapolis is forecast to approach 100 degrees on Monday, and Chicago is expected to return to the mid-90s after its last hot spell only broke on July 15th. Rising humidity is riding along with all of it, which is why the real field temperatures across the plains and the Mississippi Valley are forecast to climb into that 105 to 115 degree range through the middle of next week. So what is actually causing this to keep happening over and over in almost the same pattern? A heat dome, in simple terms, is a large area of high pressure that parks itself over a region and effectively puts a lid on it. Air inside that dome sinks, and as it sinks, it compresses and warms, while the high pressure itself blocks storm systems from moving through and clearing the heat out. Meteorologists sometimes call this an omega block, because on a weather map, the jet stream bends into a shape that resembles the Greek letter omega, with the high pressure system sitting locked in the middle of that bend, while the jet stream, which normally would push weather systems through and provide relief, gets shoved so far north that it simply cannot reach down and break the pattern up. That is precisely why these heat domes have been able to persist for so many days at a stretch this summer, rather than clearing out in the usual day or two. Layered on top of that mechanical explanation is a bigger seasonal one. On June 11th, the National Weather Service confirmed that El Niño conditions were present across the Pacific, and forecasters flagged early on that this could develop into what they termed a super El Niño as the year continued. Climate scientists have been direct about what that means in practice. El Niño years tend to produce higher baseline temperatures and a greater likelihood of prolonged heat waves, and CNN's climate coverage this summer noted that meteorologists see this year's heat domes as clearly supercharged by global warming on top of that El Niño effect, with record-high ocean temperatures worldwide adding even more energy into the system. None of this means every heat dome this summer is identical, but it does mean the underlying atmospheric conditions that make these domes possible and make them persistent once they form have been more favorable than usual for months now, which is exactly why forecasters have been able to warn about this third wave returning with real specificity rather than vague seasonal guesswork. It is also worth being honest about who actually bears the worst of this, because the risk is not distributed evenly. Reporting on the earlier July heat dome noted that emergency departments saw extremely high rates of heat-related visits concentrated specifically in lower-income neighborhoods, where outdoor work, older housing without central air, and the cost of running an air conditioner around the clock all combine to leave people more exposed. Even in households that do have air conditioning, high electricity demand during a heat dome can push utility costs up at exactly the moment families most need to keep the cooling running, forcing some to ration it. Outdoor workers, older adults, young children, and anyone managing a chronic health condition remain the groups facing the highest risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke during a stretch like this one, and public health officials have repeatedly pointed out that a large share of heat deaths in events like this trace back not to classic heat stroke, but to heart attacks and other cardiac events brought on by the added strain that extreme heat places on the body, sometimes during completely ordinary outdoor tasks. There is also an agricultural cost building underneath all of this that gets far less attention than the human one. Because this latest heat dome is producing only scattered thunderstorms rather than widespread rain, forecasters are already warning that soil moisture will deplete quickly in the areas that miss out, raising the risk of crop stress and expanding drought conditions across parts of the Central Plains through the rest of the summer. It is worth putting this in some historical perspective too, because it is easy for a phrase like heat dome to lose its weight after you have heard it 3 times in one summer. Extreme heat remains the deadliest weather hazard in the United States, killing more people in an average year than hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods combined, according to National Weather Service mortality data. The single deadliest heat event in modern American history was the Chicago heat wave of July 1995, which killed more than 700 people in that city alone over the course of about 5 days, a toll that reshaped how emergency planners across the country think about heat response to this day. This summer has not approached that scale in any single city, but the cumulative pattern, 3 separate heat domes producing confirmed deaths, hundreds of thousands of power outages, and record temperatures in cities from Atlantic City to Salt Lake City within the span of about a month, is exactly the kind of repeated, prolonged exposure that public health researchers say drives up the overall seasonal death toll, even when no individual event makes national headlines on its own. It is also not just a domestic story. The same pattern of building, record-breaking heat, has shown up on other continents this summer as well, with a punishing heat wave across parts of Europe arriving roughly a week before the first American heat dome peaked, which several meteorologists pointed to as further evidence that this is a season defined by unusually persistent global heat, rather than a handful of unrelated regional events. So, where does this go from here? The most likely path, based on current forecasts, is that this third heat dome holds through the weekend and into the early part of next week across the plains, the Dakotas, and the Mississippi Valley, before cooler air moving down out of the Great Lakes and the Northeast starts to push into the plains by the middle to latter part of next week, easing the worst of it. But easing is not the same as ending. Meteorologists tracking the broader pattern this summer have said the Northeast has the best chance of seeing real heat relief only around the final weekend of July, while the plains in the South may continue to see this kind of heat linger even longer, slowly expanding back toward the Rockies, rather than disappearing outright. Given that this is now the third heat dome to follow, essentially the same build, peak, and brief retreat cycle since late June, and given that the super El Nino pattern behind it is expected to persist rather than fade, there's no strong reason in the current data to expect this is the last one of the season. If anything, the pattern so far suggests the opposite. The honest, grounded summary is this. A heat dome that first formed over the eastern United States in late June killed at least 48 people and set all-time temperature records in cities like Atlantic City before breaking apart in a wave of storms that cut power to more than 1 million homes. A second heat dome built over the western United States in early July broke records in Phoenix and Salt Lake City and became one of the 2 strongest heat domes anywhere on the planet at that moment before sliding into the Midwest by mid-July. Now, in the final week of this month, a third heat dome has formed over Texas and the interior Southwest, and it is expanding north through the plains, the Dakotas, and the Mississippi Valley, pushing real field temperatures as high as 115 degrees, driven by the same jet stream blocking pattern and the same super El Nino conditions that produced the first 2. Relief, when it comes, looks partial and temporary rather than a clean end to the pattern. We are going to keep tracking this the same way we did today, straight from National Weather Service alerts, AccuWeather's senior meteorologists, and State Health Department data, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update, because based on the pattern we just walked through, this heat dome is unlikely to be the last one this summer. And leave that comment below. Tell me if this heat has reached you yet. And if you are somewhere expecting triple-digit real field temperatures this weekend, take it seriously. Check in on anyone in your life who is older, works outdoors, or does not have reliable air conditioning. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.